Hola, soy Betsabeth Sastre Flores, horticultora comercial de Virginia Cooperative Extension en el condado de Loudoun, Virginia. En un suelo saludable, en donde las raíces y otros seres vivos se abrazan silenciosamente, yace el secreto de la salud del mundo. En este microcosmo invisible a simple vista reside la vida misma. Yo sigo los 4 principios de la salud del suelo porque en él se erige la biodiversidad, la sostenibilidad y la prosperidad de nuestro planeta.
3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. Hey, everybody. Jeff Ishii here with another episode of For the Soil, a conversation, along with my co-host, Dr. Eric Benfelt, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Community Viability, as well as Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Hope you appreciated that special introduction by Beth Sashspray. Does an excellent role with Virginia Cooperative Extension, knows a lot about soil health, and we appreciate that special introduction in Spanish. Dr. Benfelt, would you introduce our special guest today?
Yes, Jeff and Mary, we're very pleased to have Tim Ohlwiler with us. Tim serves as an extension agent in Fauquier County based in Warrenton, and he's an extension agent for horticulture, serving both commercial and residential needs there in the region. And Tim brings a unique background of experience with orchards and berries, landscapes, cut flowers, and have worked with Tim on soil health at different times. And Tim also serves on the Fauquier Education Farm Board of Directors and was recently recognized as the 2023 Friend of 4-H in Fauquier County. So welcome, Tim. And if you could tell us a little bit more about your background and interest in soil health, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. It's good to be on. I grew up out west for the most part, in the deserts of the Mountain West, and that's where I was introduced to horticulture and growing things, and kind of cultivated my love of plants. And then, anyway, my dad was military, and we ended up on the East Coast, and I went to school in Virginia and got stuck out here. But anyway, it's been a good journey. And with Extension, I came to Extension a little over 15 years ago, after teaching middle school agri-science in Fauquier County for 5 years. And anyway, it's been I work mostly with, as you said, the home horticulture world, primarily with the Master Gardener program, and then I work with the commercial industry, which includes tree fruit, small fruit, vegetables, kind of that world. So,
Tim, if you could, give us a little bit of background about the area that you operate in, Fauquier County. Some of our listeners might not be familiar with that area of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and they're thinking, row crops and aquaculture, and they're thinking tobacco. I mean, Virginia is a very diverse state, but fill us in on what your area is like. Kind of paint that landscape for us.
yeah, so we have we're about 45 miles west of Washington, D.C. We stretch from the Blue Ridge Mountains down into the Piedmont for 20-something miles. And anyway, it's a long county. And, we grow on the kind of the hillier parts of the county up towards the Blue Ridge. We're growing a lot of tree fruit, and there's a thriving grape growing industry there. There's also, a lot of cattle being raised and hay being produced as well. And then as you kind of migrate south in the county, we have a very strong dairy industry that's wrapped around the transport links that take food into the city. And then, there's some row crops that complement that industry as well. And then, there's some fruit and vegetable growers that are kind of doing stuff to complement the local food movement and selling into the city and selling direct to consumers and things like that as well.
And Tim, you mentioned that you mentioned tree fruits and vineyards. and would be interested kind of, what soil health looks like on those landscapes. I'm used to working with a lot of corn and soybean producer. You're planting every year. It's a very different management approach, but would be interested how you approach soil health on those more perennial landscapes.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I grew up out west, and in the West, we don't do this anymore, but when I was a kid, they would still till and plow the cherry orchards every year. It was just kind of like that was what they would do for weed control because they wanted to get as much water to the crops as they could. And so in Virginia, in the tree fruit industry, we're doing almost no soil disturbance once the trees are planted. And, we're sometimes concerned with, erosion and things that happen with the tracks where the tractors are running to run the spray rigs and the harvest equipment throughout the orchards. But we're not doing any intentional management of weeds or anything like that with tillage in an orchard situation. In the grape world, it's a little bit different. The grape growers really would like to have the area underneath their grapevines clear of vegetation. Both, tree fruit, it generally is larger, and so it can kind of manage the weeds by overshadowing them, and they're not that big of a competition. But with grapes, the fruit and the canopy is so much closer to the ground that we're concerned about weeds interfering with the ability of the spray rigs to operate efficiently around the grapes and for people to get in there and manage and things like that. So there's a lot of weed management that's happening there. Grapes are also planted on some really steep land, and so erosion can be a real concern underneath the grapevines. Another issue that we have with the grape world is that the grape growers continuously want to plant the grapes that are the most closely related to the European grape varieties, and they are the least tolerant of our cold weather. And so they're always pushing the boundary of whether we can survive the winter here. And so a lot of our local grape growers will plant double trunks on their grapevines so that if we get a really cold winter, so they start seeing damage when we get below about 5 degrees. And then when we get below 0, we're really getting into the high likelihood of seeing damage on some of our cultivars of grapes. And so another thing that I've seen grape growers do actually is they will till the soil, like they will plow up a mound of soil over the graft of the grapevines so that if we were to have a really cold winter that winter, and the grapevines did die down, at least they would not die down below the graft union, and those grapevines would be able to survive the winter. And so then, then in the spring, they have to go through and pull all that soil back. But it's a lot of disturbance. It's a lot of, there's damage to the vines gets done inadvertently. It's very labor intensive, but all that. Anyway, that's a long answer to that question about soil disturbance in those two perennial crops.
And Tim, between orchards and vineyards, what are you seeing as far as like cover crops, and then also with vineyards, the role of the actual soil type and the quality of the soil with the taste and flavor of the wines? What's emerging there?
So the orchard growers, I'll just start with them. Once in a while, we have conversations about, cover crops, but I would say I haven't seen anybody doing anything with them. They just their management is they mow whatever vegetation is there, once or twice a year to keep woody plants at bay and try to keep vines from creeping up into their trees and things like that. So that's what they're doing. The grape growers, it's really kind of a struggle with, we've looked at things like it's this struggle with, do you plant something there and then how do you manage it so that it doesn't get too tall and it doesn't steal away too much water from the grapevines, or it doesn't, anyway, it's just a perennial problem with those grape growers, and a lot of them are just using herbicides to basically keep the ground completely clear underneath their grapes. I have worked with a grower that was trying to use a fine fescue underneath the grapes with some success. I had another grower that I went out to last year, and we were looking at a situation where he was really concerned about the erosion underneath his vines. And I said, well, you've got, it was on pretty dry, rocky soil, and we were in, July last year when it hadn't rained much, and the Bermuda grass or the wiregrass was doing just fine in his orchard, or in the vineyard. And, it was conversation about, do you want to encourage this kind of grass here? This is probably the most traffic tolerant grass that you could put in this space, but it's also very aggressive, and, do you want to encourage it? So anyway, we haven't checked in again to see where that landed, but that was certainly a conversation we were having.
We're talking today with Tim Ohlwiler with Virginia Cooperative Extension. And Tim, I'd like to pause here and kind of go back in history, if you will. I believe you told me before we started recording today that you at one time were an agri-science teacher, and I believe you taught 8th grade, which is in middle school. And I'd like to take you back to, let's kind of pretend that this is now the month of September. We're starting a brand new school year, and you've got a brand new class of students, and one of the first lesson plans is on soil health. Walk us through that lesson plan.
Well, let me just say that first day I could not find the light switch to my new classroom, so that was the big challenge. It's very stressful, but anyway, we eventually found the light switch and were able to get started. But as we talked about soil and soils when I was teaching then, I don't know that we talked about soil health so much as just kind of the functions of soil as far as being a source of nutrients and a source of water, and for the plants that we were growing, and looking at soils as far as, sometimes soils are better for growing certain types of plants, and some soils are better for growing other types of plants.
Did you have a school garden?
We did have a school garden. I actually taught. So when I taught in the county, I taught at 2 different middle schools the whole time. So I was itinerant. I would start in the morning at one school, and then I would go to another school, and we had school gardens at both schools. So the administrations were always really supportive, and it was always a challenge to try and get 7th and 8th graders to pull some weeds and spend some time outside, but that was an enjoyable thing we got to do. I think the kids were always good about. We eventually kind of went to this system where we would give them each a little tiny plot of, a couple of square feet, and that seemed to be the most effective way to get them engaged, instead of one big, everybody goes out and weeds the class garden or whatever. But anyway.
And Tim, do you still get to work with youth at all in your role with Extension? And if so, are you seeing an excitement around soil with young people?
Yeah, so I actually get to work with youth quite a bit. We do, every year we do a 3rd grade farm tour in partnership with our local soil and water conservation district, and I usually get to teach the soils section. And we take a soil core and show them, several feet deep down into the soil profile, and they get to look at that. I ask them questions about, the soil core is laying on the side of the ground at this point. It's not vertical as it was in the soil profile anymore. And so one of the questions always fun to ask them is, which part is the top and which part is the bottom? And they, they know, because, well, they can see the grass at the top, but they also know, like, healthy soil, it's dark, and it's, they just get that. Even by 3rd grade, they've gotten that figured out, what healthy, good soil looks like. So I always find that fascinating.
And with that, Tim, is there aspects that have really gotten the 4-H or the youth excited as they interact with the soil and nature in general?
Well, I think anytime the instructor's excited, the kids will pick up on that energy. So, and I try to make it as hands-on as possible. Let's touch the soil. Let's, feel the difference between a sandy soil and a clay soil, and put that in your hands and smell it. That's another thing I often get the kids to do, is smell the soils and see what they smell. I tempt them to taste them, but they usually don't go for that bit. But anyway, it's fun.
Eighth graders are pretty smart, they're not going to eat dirt because the teacher said so. Tim, it's been a real pleasure having you on this episode. We'd like to invite you to stay around and record a second episode of our podcast, For the Soil, a Conversation. Would you be willing to do that?
Sure, we can see where it goes.
Absolutely. All right. Well, great. Our guest is Tim Ohlwiler. He is with Virginia Cooperative Extension in Fauquier County, Virginia. And thank you so much for everything you do. We always tip our hat and we salute military veterans, but I like to salute school teachers and extension agents. They do a lot of stuff. So thank you for being with us, Tim.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Our guest in this segment, and he will be returning in a couple of weeks for another segment with For the Soil, a Conversation, Mr. Tim Ohlwiler with Virginia Cooperative Extension. We've got just an extra moment. Would like to remind everyone of the website forthesoil.org. That is the digit for thesoil.org. And we have a brand new blog entry, How Farmers Markets Can Be For the Soil. And it'll walk you through the steps of a farmer's market and how they can be for the soil. By the way, National Farmers Market Week was celebrated just recently, and congratulations to the Charlottesville City Market. They were ranked the #1 farmers market in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Charlottesville City Market. Congratulations to all farmers who participate in that particular farmers market. For the Soil, a Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you should have a specific question about soil health, just call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a soil and water conservation district office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.